Let's see here. Give it a second. Okay, looks like we are live. Let me just pull it up on YouTube as well in case anyone shows up for chat. Not a big deal if y'all don't. But let's go ahead and dive into this thing, shall we, folks? So, first thing I'm going to do is I've got a few questions. So, someone was asking me, first off, how many calories in 60 seconds is good on an air bike? 15-ish calories is kind of a good target. You know, if you look at a lot of those functional fitness classes, High Rocks, CrossFit, a lot of them, right? They kind of use this as a good benchmark, and I think as a strongman athlete, we should be striving for similar, especially on something like an air bike, which doesn't have the same scaling issues for body weight as, say, you know, burpees or chin-ups do, right? Because the stationary bike is a stationary piece, stationary. The air bike is stationary. Your body weight doesn't factor into it. If anything, if you're heavier, you should be putting out more because you have a bigger engine, ostensibly. But that's neither here nor there, so that's a good first question. Our second question was about if passive grip training is enough for the strongman athlete. And the answer is it depends. You know, it's one of those things like for myself, I don't do any direct grip training in my own training, but I also don't deadlift with straps, and I do farmers, I do chins, I do a lot of controlled eccentrics on my deads. So there's tons of grip work being built there. I've never had trouble with grip in competition. Now, if you are someone who has trouble with your grip, obviously you do need to train your grip more directly. So it's one of those things where I do think you need to kind of see where your bottlenecks are to better determine whether or not you should be doing direct grip work. But in general, some direct grip work is never a bad idea for the strongman athlete. And if you haven't trained grip and you are finding you are suffering from it, just adding in stuff like slow eccentrics on your deadlifts, on your pulling movements when you're not wearing straps, that's going to pay a lot of very big dividends. Doing dead hangs before your workout, great for grips, great for shoulder health. Just one of those things where dead hangs are probably a good all-around thing. So definitely a big fan of them. The next question was conditioning for strongman. What is your best bang for the buck setup? Without doubt, air assault bike. Number one, air assault bike. I know that the rower is very popular, and for good reason. Rowers are incredible, and I think that's a good number two. But the reason I'm picking the air assault bike over the rower is the air assault bike does not take up as much space. They're also easier to find secondhand. So it's one that I think you can just not go wrong with. They're very easy on the body. You can train them, you know, every day of the week and be just fine. I like that it's upper and lower body. You know, you got the arms, you got the hips, there's rotation elements to it. So it's kind of nice to keep you from getting beat up. Rotating work is so important for an athlete. So without doubt, a freaking air bike. I mean, you can find them secondhand for not a lot of money. And again, very small footprint, just love them. You can go steady state with them, or you can do sprint work. There's a reason the NFL uses them, right? They're right on the side of the gridiron for a reason. They're an incredible piece of equipment. The overall design of the air bike, the Airdyne, has not changed much for as long as I can remember. They just get extra bells and whistles, but the same basic principle always applies. Using the air for resistance, exponential resistance curve, just wonderful piece. Love them. And then programming considerations for work capacity. So this is kind of an odd question to me. You know, in terms of programming for work capacity, it's just a matter of seeing where the athlete bottlenecks, how many sets we're doing per week, how many days a week. You know, generally you're going to see with me 6 to 8 movements in a given training session, 3 to 4 days a week. And then, you know, let's just say 3 hard sets for everything. That's a good boilerplate suggestion. So, you know, 8 times 32 movements a week. And then if we multiply that by 3, that would be 96. Yeah, 96 hard sets a week. I mean, that's kind of a good reference point. And that's, you know, just me spitballing off the top of my head. But really, when I work with people, I ask how they're feeling every week. There's a check-in they do to let me know how it's going, and then their feedback helps me determine that, because some people can handle more volume than others, and some people's work capacity is near limitless. In general, I have found that newer lifters, less strong, less developed lifters, tend to have much more work capacity, and part of that, though, is they are simply not able to work hard enough to worry about overtraining. So that is some food for thought. As a lifter gets stronger, work capacity becomes relative, right? Because if you're got 2 lifters, one's max is 800, the other's is 500, and they're both, you know, hitting, let's say, work in the 80% range. The guy with the 800-pound max is objectively doing more work, so it's not that he has diminished capacity, he's just doing more work outright. So it's one of those things we want to be mindful of. You know, there's a reason you didn't see guys like Brian Shaw doing 20-rep deads, right? It just doesn't serve the purpose. So considerations would be lifter age, lifter recovery, but it's one of those things, it's so individualized, there's not too much to say in that capacity. And last but not least, for today's little live, I'm going to share with you a sample split for a power building athlete of mine. So when I say power building, he actually is competing in powerlifting too. He is getting ready for a meet. So I have a sample, kind of the template, as well as what that might look like. Because for someone who isn't doing strongman and we have a meet coming up, we want to be mindful of, I guess, making sure that we have a higher degree of specificity for him as a power lifter in the prep phase, right? Which means squatting and deadlifting twice a week and doing them both in the same session, which a lot of people are going to freak out about. But it's one of those things. Intelligent programming means you can control fatigue. So for example, on day one, you'd have your main squat, the competition squat, and then you would deadlift from the floor, but you wouldn't be doing max effort deads, maybe something like speed deads or pause deadlifts to help improve positioning off the floor, and then relevant accessories. Day two, we'd have your competition bench. This would be your heavy overload day. Then overhead variation, upper back, triceps, and delts. So for example, they might do their competition bench and then a behind the neck press, and then some upper body accessories. And then day three, this would be our heavy deadlift day, but you'll see what we're doing is we're actually doing a variation squat to begin the day, which would probably be a pause squat, because pause squats are incredible, generally low fatigue. Just something like 3 sets of 2 is going to do a lot for this athlete in question, but then not gas them out before moving into their competition deadlift for intensive. So you will see with this template as well, the intensive lift is actually the competition lift, and then our variation comes under the developmental one. That way we can intentionally go extra light there because we're 2 steps away from the primary competition variation, but we're picking variations that allow them to refine their positioning and technique for competition carryover. So they have pause squats, competition dead, accessories, and then day 4 we'd have our variation bench press, again developmental, which for a powerlifter, something like a Spoto press or a long pause bench press would be very valuable here. 40-degree incline press, and then some upper back and arm work. Pretty basic template. Obviously, set rep schemes are highly dependent on what we have going on. But you can see here, essentially, every lift, all of the big 3 are hit for both intensive and developmental effort in the same week. And again, I think this would actually work really nicely for powerlifting specific, because there is always going to be an element of fatigue present on the deadlift event in competition. So we want to train around that. So that's just some food for thought there. Oh, speaking of set rep schemes, I did get this question on the last YouTube live in the comments section. Someone was asking me about how I go about choosing set rep schemes, all the different progressions, right? 8x8, rest, pause, 2, RD, blah. Honestly, it's all preference and what is appropriate. So for example, rear delt flies, I'm never going to do something like 2 sets of 6, the 2RD6 method, because no one does sets of 6 on rear delt flies. It's just not a movement that lends itself really well to a narrow progressive overload. I think higher reps, especially for rear delts, are important because we want to work them with very high volume. That's what they need to get stronger and develop the stability to help you with your press. So, I think, okay, rear delts, high rep, I want it to hurt, so 8x8. Rest, pause, stuff like that's going to be very valuable. Whereas if my accessory is something like, let's say, a skull crusher, I can go as low as 6 reps there and get away with it. My elbows are okay, so I could do rest, pause. But conversely, I find high rep skull crushers, my shoulder gets unstable. I can't get much out of it, so it becomes a bottleneck. So I personally wouldn't be reaching for something like the, maybe doing sets of 20. It's going to vary based off of what you can get out of it. Think about movements that just groove themselves well to higher or lower reps. I believe the data shows that it's between 5 and 30 reps has similar muscle building outcomes regardless, as long as the effort is equated. So just find ones that you like, you're going to stick to, and hammer. For me, most of my accessories, 2RD10 is what I reach for, because I can do that week in, week out without getting bored and really just chase those consistent progressions, get those plus ones. And, like I tell my athletes, when it comes to our accessory work, we don't necessarily need to progress every single week, but we need to chase hard quality sets to build a wide foundation to support the high peaks on the main lifts. And if the main lifts are going in the right direction, then we know everything else that's subservient to the main lifts are fulfilling their role. Yeah, that's all I've got for the YouTube Live. Doesn't look like we had anyone join me. So